Hi everyone, this is Travels with an Archaeologist. I'm the Archaeologist, now let's get into the travels. So I make a big deal about not using AI either in my editing or my research, but today I'm breaking that rule a little bit, but only so I can show you why. We're hearing a lot about AI lately, especially how it can replace even seasoned experts, so as an expert myself, I took that personally. Now, it's obviously easy to get an AI bot to hallucinate, so my goal here isn't necessarily to shame AI in that regard. Because these people have a genuine faith in the answers that these chatbots provide. They aren't trying to make them hallucinate, so I won't either. So, what I am going to do, though, is I'm going to ask it about my specialization, and then I'm going to critique the answers that it gives me. In the interest of full disclosure, I did record the answers this chatbot gave me ahead of time, and I will not be doing this live, so to speak, but this is partially for the video length, and partially because I wanted to give time to re-research some of the claims it made that, to me, do look a bit weird. And I want to emphasize this, I did not edit this in a way to make this chatbot look bad, and you can see the unedited conversation with this chatbot on my Patreon just so you can compare what I put on the video to what I actually typed. Basically, there's no funny business going on, it's just standard video edits and voiceovers. And for those of you who don't know, my specialization is Bronze Age trade, but my dissertation specifically was focused on the island of Rhodes in Greece. I did one of my earlier videos on it if you'd like to see that. I'm going to ask the AI to explain my specialization to me. I'm going to give it very direct questions, and then I'm going to break down its answers and see how accurate or inaccurate it is. I'm also going to give my final assessment later. Okay, so let's get started. So, hi, ChatGPT. Let's see what you can tell me about Bronze Age Rhodes, and let's add a please because, our cyborg masters will one day judge us for our politeness. Played an important role in Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean networks, that it did. 3000 to 1100 BCE. That's okay. Trianda, Catavia, and Phanes. So I'll give it Trianda for sure. Catavia is a lot more disputed, but Phanes is... Yeah, I'm gonna come back to that one because that one's weird. Handmade pottery as opposed to machine-made, I suppose, because wheel-made you still make it with your hands. Very good. Now, Cycladic and Anatolian cultures is interesting because the Mycenaeans and the Hittites didn't really like each other. The Hittites, in particular, we know had an embargo on the Mycenaeans. So, was Rhodes influenced by Anatolian cultures? Not really, and certainly not in the late Bronze Age. We've got some flimsy conclusions being made. Let's keep going into this. Yeah. Yeah, the collapse and transition looks okay. Now, this summary here, that is highly debated. Nobody really agrees on that. So, archaeological highlights. What's been found at Trianda or Lindos? Lindos, yes. Lindos, I would like to see, because there's not a lot we know from Bronze Age Lindos. So let's dig into that. I think I might have found our first real big mistake here. So, yes, I'm curious what evidence was found in Lindos. Ooh, there we go. It's taken a while. It knows that I got it out. Oh my goodness, no. No, 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 no. That is classical. That is classical Lindos right there. Bronze Age metal artifacts. It's citing specific artifacts, which is difficult for me because I know the patterns, I know certain artifacts, but there's literally thousands of artifacts from the Bronze Age found on Rhodes. I can't know every one of them. Let's give it the benefit of the doubt. Burials and settlement evidence, again, in the Lindos area, so not Lindos, but close enough to Lindos. The actual chamber tombs are located here, which is close enough. Surrounded by a wall during the Bronze Age. No. No evidence for that. Lindos is one of the few places on Rhodes where Bronze Age materials have been identified via tombs and metal finds rather than simply assumed. Define few. Now, there's nowhere near as many places where they've been found as there have been, say, classical remains, but I would say there's quite a few places on Rhodes where late Bronze Age materials are known. Now, I actually want to go back a little bit to this wall, I do think it would be useful for us to actually figure out where this is a wall. Where do they know this wall exists? Because I don't know where ChatGPT is getting this from. Lindos has not been excavated to that extent, at least not Bronze Age Lindos. Yeah, there we go. The Acropolis of Lindos is dominated by, well, classical and Hellenistic anyway. Oh, archaic, yeah. By a few local popular accounts like tourism or cultural websites. Oh, no, 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 no. Oh, no, 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 no. They extrapolate there must have been a wall because of, everything after tourism and cultural websites is already invalidated. And they're speculating that there must have been a wall. They're not actually saying where there would have been a wall. So yeah, all of this is, I'm not opposed to Lindos having a Bronze Age wall. In fact, it's probably likely. But yeah, as it says here, any claim of a Bronze Age wall must be treated as speculative. So I caught it in a bit of a lie there. It was likely inhabited in the late Bronze Age, that is true. Would you like me to show you what's known about Bronze Age settlement layers beneath the Acropolis structures? Yeah, I would, because the Acropolis has not been excavated. It's very deliberately been left up as a cultural and historic site. Okay, so it's coming from the Danish archaeological expedition. That was pretty much the first one, I think the earliest one I cited in my dissertation. Yeah, we're pretty much seeing everything that I said, that it's all been surface finds, none of it has really been found from beneath. And again, I'm not opposed to any of this. In fact, part of my dissertation, I argue that we should be looking at Lindos more, that because all we have is surface finds and surface excavations, we aren't getting a full picture, and there probably was something more to Bronze Age Lindos than we know, but we don't actually know anything fully or specifically. And this has either scraped my dissertation and the video I made on roads, which I'm not putting it past it, or it's simply being caught in lies and giving some of the best things it can through hallucination. If you want to see more on this, I do have a video of what I've done on roads. I'm also going to put my dissertation on Patreon, and if you want to read that, it probably is worth it if you want to go into more detail on this. It's also good to get a view. But let's go back up. I said I wanted to return to it. Let's go back up to Fanny's. I still cannot believe it's showing classical Lindos for Bronze Age Lindos. That is absolutely insane. Moving on. Coming back up here, I want to return. Where did I find it? Trianda, Ilesos, Camiros, Lindos. Camiros is another one like Lindos where I said we should be studying it more in potential late Bronze Age and early Bronze Age settlement. But I'll give that one to ChatGPT. Instead, I do want to focus on the one that I suspect is wrong, which is Fanny's. And I'm not saying there's no evidence at Fanny's, but to identify it as the earliest Bronze Age settlement, that's weird. In the early Bronzer Age, I think they covered that in the Jersey Shore. Anyway, no, early Bronze Age. Let's go into more detail on that, please. Asomatos, that is the early Bronze Age site, and that is nowhere near Fanny's. This is Fanny's on here on this map of roads, and this is Asomatos. It shows the same picture that we got. Let me go rewind this video a bit. It's the same picture from both Bronze Age Lindos and Bronze Age Fanny's, aka Asomatos, which, yeah. And up here, this is just absolutely terrible, this top corner. You're going to show me the crusading fortress built by the Knights of Rhodes around the city of Rhodes, which is, again, in island terms, not near Asomatos. To be honest, when I saw this on rewatch, I caught the same statue, which really surprised me, but I completely missed the medieval Gothic architecture. No, that is Crusader, that is medieval, that is not early Bronze Age Fanny's, and that is also not early Bronze Age Asomatos. So here's its context, what it's found and uncertainties remain. The site described as part of the northwestern region of Rhodes near Krematsi and the Ilissos area. That is true. Megaron-type architecture, pottery and material culture, all of that is fine. None of this is terribly wrong. None of it may be terribly right, but none of it is terribly wrong. Here we go. Again, connections to other islands and Anatolia. And there actually does seem to have been a lot of Anatolian influence in the early Bronze Age, so I am going to give it a pass on that one. But I don't know if it's just getting it wrong because it's always gotten it wrong, or if it got it right on purpose. I don't know if it's right by accident, and I don't know if it's right on purpose. That's the problem. Now, researchers. What's this one? For roads more generally, researchers highlight EBA. I do want to figure out, I want to go into what it is saying. Now, what is this source? It's in... Is this all in Greek? Is there no English translation here? No, it appears that it's all in Greek. So basically, ChatGPT has scraped this document, translated it to English, and then said, "Trust me, bro, this is what's going on." A little embarrassed that I don't speak Greek, given how much studying I've done in and about the area. But let's see its next source. The Oxford Handbook of the Bronze Age Aegean. This source I've actually read. This source I have cited in my dissertation, which again you can find on Patreon. But it doesn't really... Is this just an index? I think this might just be an index, which again just proves that it has scraped this source without permission and spat out everything it found after searching for keywords. Anyway, so none of this is that wrong. Limitations and open questions. If you like, I can pull out specific excavation reports. No need. Not only do I discuss those in my dissertation, I actually spoke to the lady who excavated Bronze Age Asamatos, Tula Marketu. She's a brilliant woman, and I do cite her quite a bit in my own studies, and whenever I talk about Bronze Age roads, her name will always come up because she is probably the most knowledgeable person still alive on the planet who can talk about this. So no, we don't need her excavation records. I don't really want to see them scraped. I want to ask something that someone who's not as knowledgeable as me might reasonably ask. What happened to the Minoans on roads? Okay, that's true. Find Camares. Town planning at Trianda, which is the Middle Bronze Age name of Ialissos. Yeah. It feels like this has maybe scraped the video I did on roads, or even scraped my dissertation with some of this, because it's kind of parroting back stuff I would have known, but it's also very shallow. So Lindos, again, is bringing up Lindos and Camiros, which is, again, a bit problem. They were absorbed and not annihilated. That is true. That is actually true. Most of this is actually right. I actually really expected it to take the conquest narrative, but it didn't. And that's impressively accurate for ChatGPT. But let's go back up. I want to focus on this timetable. This is highly debated. Scholars do not agree on any of these approximate dates. There's very, very healthy and sometimes unhealthy debate going on with it. But because it's hard to reconcile chronologies even for professionals, let's give ChatGPT a pass on that one. Instead, let's go into this Minoan-Mycenaean transition. Now, I have to think about what can I reasonably phrase this as somebody who does not know anything about Bronze Age roads, and that's actually a very hard mindset for me to get into, as you can imagine. What's a question that people who don't know that much about this, but are also thinking about things, what would they... And treating ChatGPT like gospel, what would they ask? How would they ask this? Yeah, okay. Why didn't the Minoans fight back? That's a good one. Let's go with that one. Very insightful question. Not really. Yeah, okay, they didn't or couldn't fight back in the conventional sense. Now, I've actually done a video on the Minoans, and I've done one on Knossos, and this is a video I really do recommend you check out, because I break down all the problems with Knossos in particular, its reconstruction, but also with what we actually know about the Mycenaeans, and it focuses on a lot of the problems that ChatGPT is actually bringing up and clearly not doing any further research into, especially the eruption of Thera. Now, see, the Thera eruption in 1628 BCE didn't destroy Minoan civilization outright, but if we go up earlier, I'll rewind the video a bit later in editing, you can see that it actually cites Thera as being one of the things that caused the Minoans to decline. So here it's giving you two separate answers. This second one, by the way, under a weakened Crete, this is the correct one. It didn't destroy Minoan civilization. Internal crises and fragmentation, again, do watch my video on Knossos and the Minoans. We don't really know what happened to them. It's certainly possible there was an internal crises and fragmentation, but we just don't know. Yeah, a peaceful or limited force takeover. This is... Now, everything that it has said about this is not wrong. It's not really right, but it's also not really wrong, and that's the problem, isn't it? It's giving you answers that are mostly right, but the stuff it gets wrong, it's really getting some stuff wrong. The problem with this chatbot is it's just not smart enough to determine what is debate, what is conjecture, and separate that from what is known fact and what is interpretation. And this is something that obviously most academics and scholars can and will do. But let's keep going on this thread. Now, let's try and make this the last question. So this blending is exactly why later Greek myth remembers Cretan roads not as conquered lands, but as places of ancient wisdom and divine favor. Pure conjecture. Pure conjecture. Absolutely no evidence for that. So let's really try and pin this down. Where did ChatGPT get these sources? That's a wonderful question. You can almost hear the hesitation in that. Yeah, almost none of what we know about any of this was written down in the narrative form. This is true. So we finally got it, acknowledging some things. But the thing is, everything has been telling you about ritual, religion, blending, later myths. All of this depends on there being a written source so that we can connect it to a modern source. Everything without that is pure conjecture. That's why history is so important to blend with archaeology. They recorded on the Bronze Age people themselves recorded only inventories on linear A and B. Only on linear B, actually. We have no idea what linear A is saying, but in fairness, ChatGPT does acknowledge that linear A can't be translated, so I'll just call that an oops. Now, I'm going to break my rule a bit here, and I am going to actually ask it a leading question to force a hallucination, and I'm going to do this not to prove a point per se, but just have a bit of fun. Now, I'm going to do this in a way where you, as a student in my class, even if you knew nothing, if this was our first class and I was telling you to do this, you would know I was messing with you. You would get a chuckle out of this question. But ChatGPT will take this very seriously. Yeah, obviously, everybody here watching knows that this is not a real paper. There is a guy called R. Hope Simpson who I suspect is going to... Yup, there we go, R. Hope Simpson. But he does not have a 1989 work. And obviously when I say Homer Simpson 1989, you know exactly who I'm referring to. But there we go. So ChatGPT has already given a hallucination answer. Now, just to make absolutely sure that ChatGPT is hallucinating and I'm not, let's come up here and just double check. Yeah, let's see what he's published. So he's got 15 publications. Now, most of R. Hope Simpson, I did cite him in my dissertation. Most of what he has done has been in the 60s regarding roads. However, prehistoric Laconia, yep. Now, he actually has written on the Iliad, interesting. Not on the Rhodian papers, so I might have been a little bit unfair to ChatGPT. Nevertheless, if you look at this, absolutely none of this comes from 1989. Most of this stuff is from the 60s. He's got one from 2003, one or two from 2003. Check our second source. Wikipedia not usually really good, but for articles and publications it usually is. Yeah, and again, nothing from 1989 here either. So it didn't get the joke, and that means that pretty much everything it has said after that point is all hallucination. That being said, is this actually what R. Hope Simpson says about the Iliad in his works? it doesn't really matter because, again, everything after that was all hallucination. There was no Simpson 1989 paper, and anybody reading that question, any human reading that question, would most likely understand it's a joke. So yeah, I don't think that's necessary. Let's there we go. Fine, whatever. So let's ask it about the sea peoples and the Mycenaeans, because this is actually a controversial topic that doesn't have a clear answer. And again, I've made a video on this. I've made a video detailing on what evidence there is for them and against them, and anybody who's watched that will know that I think they were Mycenaeans, and I do lay out my proof as to why I think so. So the reason I'm asking ChatGPT this question is we know that AI wants to give you confirmation bias, it wants to make you feel good, so I want to see what this question will actually produce, because I'm going in knowing that my view, I believe it's right, but I'm also acknowledging that there's no solid scholarly consensus. So I'm not going to use any evidence it gives me in bad faith, but I want to make sure what it's actually doing with it too. Again, okay, so there is no solid evidence. This is good. This is good. So it seems like a lot of the developers at ChatGPT have corrected the confirmation bias a little bit. But we don't really know much yet. For Philistine sites, yes, migration patterns. And the case against them. Okay, so it does give you a case equating against them. That is good. I like that, actually. That's more impressive than I thought it would give me, because I did this specifically to see if there was going to be a confirmation bias. Now, in fairness, this is me asking a confirmation bias question in a way where I'm convinced that I'm right, but I don't know for sure. Imagine if I was actually trying to actively mislead somebody, the kind of questions I could ask this and then present as evidence in a paper, though. That is the thing that I wanted to highlight. Now, Mycenaeans were the sea peoples, no direct evidence, weak argument. I wouldn't say it's weak. I wouldn't. Some sea peoples were I would actually switch these two, that sea people invasions and Mycenaean collapse were connected to being strong, and that some sea peoples were of Mycenaean origin, very strong. I would actually switch those two around. I think, frankly, the second one is way more likely than the third one, but I think all three are quite strong arguments. But I think it's trying to avoid this confirmation bias that has come up in recent analyses. So, no direct evidence, this is true. Not necessarily a weak argument. If it had actually done its research, it could present a very strong case, as I present a very strong case. But you could also present a very strong case against them too. But ChatGPT has done not really any of it. Now, I actually want to go back to the Egyptian thing, because it says the Egyptian name for the sea peoples does not match the name for the Mycenaeans. So that is an interesting one to ask. So what is the Egyptian name for Bronze Age Greeks? Yeah. See, there we go. So they did not have a single consistent name. So with one question, I've already debunked one of its major cases against Mycenaeans being sea peoples. I could probably do it more, but frankly, I don't want to, because I'm really not here to push some sort of narrative. I'm not here to prove myself right or wrong using AI. I just wanted to prove that you can find a lot of contradictions in the evidence it gives you, one way or another. Egyptians never had a term for Greeks in the Bronze Age world. Exactly, and that's the problem. Peliset is Philistine. The Philistines are the sea peoples. That actually is archaeologically confirmed. That is not a narrative. And yet it's saying one of the names the Egyptians had for the Bronze Age Greeks was Peliset. So it's already taking some incorrect assumptions, drawing incorrect conclusions. It's just, it's not conclusive, it's not coherent, it's not consistent. Now, let's call it there. Like I said, I do have the unedited version of this. You can see I wasn't up to any funny business. If you want to go on my Patreon and see the unedited chat I had with it, do that. But I think I've kind of made my point with this. In my final assessment, I will say that ChatGPT really was better than I thought it would be. It did present a more nuanced view than I thought it would, so I will give it points for that. But the stuff it gets right is mostly surface level, and the stuff it gets wrong, it's wrong. Now, I didn't ask it to do a deeper analysis, but I think that would either create more hallucinations or else lead to it taking to one predominant, maybe outdated point of view. But I just don't see this becoming much better that much quicker. And this is symptomatic of a deeper problem. Because of all the chatbots out there, ChatGPT is considered one of the better ones. It has no obvious political or social bias, at least not from what I've read. But even if it did, Bronze Age Roads is so niche that it's probably not really angering anyone. There's no real need for programmers and CEOs and algorithms to try to distort the answers. But that is obviously not the case with every chatbot, nor with every prompt. These things, when asked about political or social issues, statistics, and medical research, could provide very different answers based firstly on what it thinks you believe, and secondly on how their programmers want it to react. Even so, I did find ChatGPT made a few mistakes, some reasonable, but some are really amateurish. So long story short, if you want work done effectively, to a higher quality, and by people who understand the role rather than regurgitate a quick Google search, maybe hold off on downsizing your staff. In fact, I'd even think twice before you use it to assist your work for anything beyond a quick and simple proofreading. But if all you want is an ego-pleasing yes-man doing shallow, substandard work, but doing it in ways that will always tell you what you want to hear and that you're right and you're brilliant, then by all means, go get the chatbot. What? We're all screwed, aren't we? Anyway, that's all I have for today. Until next time, I'm the Archaeologist, and this has not been the Travels, but it will be next time.